Hi, I'm Andy, and this is my lesson on logical operators in Java. In this lesson, I'll show you how to write and evaluate Boolean expressions that involve the logical operators and, or, and negation. Let's get started. Here's the start of a very simple password checker program. The point of this program is to ask the user to make a password and then to check to see if that password fits all the criteria outlined in this comment. It must be between 4 and 10 characters, it must contain at least one of these special characters, and it cannot be the word password. Notice that I've already added the code to get the password from the user. Let's start with that first check, making sure the password is between 4 and 10 characters. We'll first get the password's length and store it in a variable. Then we'll make a Boolean variable called correctLength, which will indicate whether or not the password is indeed the correct length. Intuitively, you might think that an expression like this will check that the password's length is between 4 and 10, but it doesn't. This is not a valid Boolean expression in Java. Instead, we need to write the expression this way. Password length is greater than or equal to 4, and password length is less than or equal to 10. Notice the logical operator for AND in Java is 2 ampersand symbols. A Boolean expression containing AND is true if and only if both sides of the AND operator are true. So if this is true and this is true, then this entire expression is true. If either one or both evaluate to false, this whole expression is false. The AND operator is well named because it evaluates to true only if the first expression and the second expression evaluate to true. Now let's look at the second password check, which says that the password is only valid if it contains at least one of these special characters. We'll start by making a second Boolean variable, this one called contains special. To check to see if password contains a special character, remember that the indexOf method returns -1 when a substring is not found. So we simply need to check to see if the indexOf method for each character returns an integer greater than -1 to determine if that character is indeed in the password. So here's the two expressions we want to evaluate to determine if either of the two special characters are in password. Now I have to figure out what goes in this space connecting the two expressions. Notice the criteria says the password must have at least one of these characters. It can have both, but it doesn't have to. That means we don't want to put AND here. We don't need both of these expressions to be true. Instead, we want this entire Boolean expression to evaluate to true if the first part is true, or the second part is true, or both parts are true. As implied by my last statement, the logical operator that does that is called the OR operator. We use two vertical lines, sometimes called pipes, as the OR symbol. Again, with an OR operator, the entire expression evaluates to true as long as at least one of the two expressions are true. It's false only if both of the two expressions are false. Here's a nice summary of expressions involving AND logical operators and OR logical operators. Okay, let's move on to the last check we need to do. We want to make sure the password is not the word password. To do that, we'll make a Boolean called isNotPassword. On the right, we'll use the equals method to check if the password entered by the user equals the string password. But we want to check to see if the string is not equal to password. The way to do that is with the negation operator, an exclamation point. The negation operator reverses a Boolean value. True becomes false and false becomes true. So if the equals method evaluates to true, this whole expression evaluates to false and vice versa. You can roughly translate these negation operators as meaning the opposite of. So in this case, we would say that our Boolean variable will be assigned the opposite of whatever value is returned by the equals method. Let's add one more Boolean variable. This one checks to see if the password is valid by making sure it meets all three criteria. We want the isValid value to be true only if all three criteria are true. So we'll connect our Boolean statements with the AND operator. Notice these three Boolean expressions are simply the names of Boolean variables. I did not have to put equals equals true after each one because each one, by itself, evaluates to true or false. Okay, now suppose we're told that the password, in order to be valid, cannot contain any spaces in it. So we need to add a fourth check. For this one, I'm going to make a Boolean variable called contains space. Notice, in order for our password to be valid, we need this Boolean value to be false. In other words, in order for the password to be valid, we need the opposite of contains space to be true. So to incorporate it into our isValid expression, I need to use the negation operator, like this. Now let's run our program a few times and make sure the password is valid only when all four criteria are true. So that's how to use AND, OR, and negation to make a variety of more complex Boolean statements. Before we go, let's look at the evaluation of a fairly complicated Boolean statement. To figure out what this one will print, we should evaluate the logical operators in this order: negation, then and then OR. So first we evaluate the opposite of B. Since B is false, the opposite of B is true. Then we evaluate this AND expression. Since both are true, we get true. Lastly, we have this OR expression. This evaluates to true because the second value is true. Let's check just to make sure. So that's how you evaluate complicated Boolean expressions in Java. Just like with mathematical expressions, break them down piece by piece until you arrive at a final value. And that wraps up this lesson on logical operators in Java. I'm Andy. Thanks for watching and coding with me today.